Good morning and welcome to the Construction CPA's Coffee Cafe. I am the Construction CPA, Lisa Raish. We are dropping the hammer on cash flow problems so you can build things that matter. This week's topic is how to develop a business budget and stick to it. So, what are we going to talk about this week? So, when we talk about budget, kind of what exactly does that mean? So, really the objective of today's video is going to be how to create that effective budget, how to manage those expenses that you've outlined in that budget, and then how to stay financially disciplined with that budget and then improve your overall profitability in your business and just general long-term success in your business. So, why is business budgeting important? Why is it essential to your business's success? Because you're going to need to monitor and manage your cash flow. You're going to need to be able to, manage and do financial planning. And for many of you, you want to grow your businesses. So really having a budget, an efficient budget is going to help you to grow that business. One of the things that we'll talk about in the latter part of the video is some common mistakes that people make when they are building out their budgets, and then, ways for them to improve the budgets as well as avoid kind of any of those, we'll call them those common mistakes. So, what exactly, what are the basics of your business budget, right? Why do we want to do a business budget and why does it matter? Because frankly, your financial stability is crucial. Even if you don't want to grow your business, you want to keep what you have stable. You want it to be profitable. You want it to be successful. And so in order to do all of those things, and we've talked about it before, you actually have to do some planning, right? Determine where you're going to allocate your resources. What decisions are you going to have to make in the foreseeable future? Are you hiring team members? Understanding what the investment is going to be for those team members and what that looks like to your overall profitability. What does that look like for the revenues that you need to generate? You want to be able to evaluate the performance of your business. If you haven't created a budget or something to base off of, you don't actually know how well you've done. And then again, on a really, really basic level, you want to be able to avoid overspending in errors in areas and then ultimately affecting your profitability, and even maybe damaging your profitability to being in a place where you're in a loss position. So when we talk about a well-structured budget, what we're talking about is what are your revenues? So what's your revenue and your income forecasting? What are your fixed expenses and variable expenses? What are your profit margins, right? So your revenue less the cost to generate those revenues. What are you projecting your cash flow to be? Where is your cash coming and going? And also the last thing, and I think unfortunate we don't rely upon it or we don't talk about it too much is, do you have an emergency fund or do you have some sort of contingency plan to be able to get through a period where you've got unexpected costs? Case in point, a couple years back, we have COVID. COVID was not anything most people planned, and therefore was an emergency from that perspective, a lot of unexpected costs. So can you weather another COVID-like emergency period in your business to try and get you from point A to point B? So there are going to be 5 steps to creating an effective business budget. So first is going to be to analyze your income and revenue streams. Second, you're going to identify your fixed and variable expenses. Step 3, you're going to set realistic financial goals. 4, you're going to plan for unexpected costs and emergencies. And the last thing we're going to talk about, 5, is how to monitor and adjust your budget regularly. So we're going to start with step 1. Analyze your income and revenue streams. So how are you going to forecast your monthly revenue and your yearly revenue? So for example, we tend to work a lot with construction. So with our clients, many of them have projects in the pipeline, projects that they're going to be working on in the future. So from that perspective, we're usually using their project pipeline to help them build out what we think the forecast from a revenue perspective is going to be on a monthly basis and then ultimately a yearly basis. Now, for some of these clients, we may not have more than 12 months in pipeline. So anything beyond that is going to require a little bit more of a thought of what they think that they could do or what kind of projects may come up. But again, you want to look at what you think you can earn in revenues on a monthly basis, and then typically at the minimum out 12 months, because that's what we typically do with our clients. Are you in an area where your revenues are actually seasonal? So let's just use construction again as an example. If you are based in a more northern part of the country, in the wintertime, again, it tends to get cold. It's more challenging to do some construction projects. So there may be a level of seasonality to your business if you live in the northern parts of the country, because you aren't able to do as much when it's colder out. So if you have that type of seasonal fluctuation in your business where your revenues, or you may have more cash flow in your summer, warmer spring, fall months, now you need to get yourself from point A to point B through that winter months where it's, again, your revenues might be lower, less cash flow. So again, if you have that budget, you've now forecasted where you think things are going to come in and then where things will definitely still continue to go out. So now, again, you need to be able to project what your revenues are going to be over those periods to help you to weather that seasonality of your business. When you're building out or you're creating your forecast for your income or your revenue, do you have good historical data showing you what you've historically done over the last couple of years? For example, when we go back to this seasonality, what have you historically done over those winter months in terms of revenues, so that you can create a baseline of what you think you would at least do during that period? And then what have you historically done in your warmer months, your spring, your fall, your summer months? And that you use those types of things for your projections, right? You project out what you think you're going to do, but in most cases, you're using some level of historical data along with potentially projects that you actually have in your pipeline. And you're using the two of them together. In some cases, you're not using straight historical data or just growth projections. You're typically using a combination of the two. But you want to have good historical data to base some of your assumptions on any kind of future activity on. Next, step 2, you want to identify your fixed and variable expenses. So what are the fixed expenses in your business? It's going to be the rent, the utilities for your office, the insurance, the liability policies, the workers' comp, all of those things. And then the payroll for the team members that you have all year round. So if you are a seasonal business, maybe you lay off your laborers in the winter, but you still have your administrative and your office staff and your managers in place. So those are your fixed costs, right? Those are the things that aren't going to go away. You're going to have those every month. Then what are your variable expenses going to be? Well, your variable expenses typically are going to be driven by the volume or the amount of revenue that you're going to be doing. So what are those things? That's going to be your materials. You might ramp up your marketing in the summer months, but you ramp down your marketing in the winter because you're clearly not going to generate revenues during those periods. Your subs costs, right? The subcontractors, if you're not doing as much revenue in the winter months as you are in the rest of the year, those costs are going to change. They're going to vary based on the volume of revenue that you have at various times of the year. Now, if you're in a more, we'll call it a seasonably stable area where you probably have pretty consistent revenues, year over, like throughout the year, that may not be as much of an issue. But again, even if you are in a seasonably warm area, we tend to see lower revenues in that year end, that December, January. For example, people typically aren't, if you're in renovation, if you are, typically no one's going to be renovating their kitchen in the 3 weeks leading up to Christmas or in the 3 weeks after Christmas. Again, that's just general rules of this particular industry. That may not be the case if you're in other types of industries. But again, those are the things that you want to think about. That's the variability, the movement in your revenues that will affect some of the other expenses in your business. And then, how can you categorize them so that you can create better financial tracking? You may want to create more line items to track more information instead of putting everything into a big bucket and like, oh, these are all the expenses. These might be all your cost of sales, all your cost of goods sold, right? This is your marketing. I'm sorry, your materials, your subs, your labor, all in here. But the reality is you want to break that out into materials, subs, other labor, all of these, right? You want to have it not just one big bucket. So it's a lot easier to track. And again, you've got better ability to forecast or budget moving forward because you've got more detail instead of kind of throwing everything into one bucket. You kind of split it up into smaller other baskets to track that information. So step 3 is set realistic financial goals. We all want to set stretch goals, right? That really, really big stretch number that we want to hit. But if you're using historical data to build out a forecast, and if you've historically increased your revenues 5, 6, 8% per year, to suddenly say I'm going to increase my revenues 40% year over year is a really big jump. So again, you want to set realistic goals, but you want to have your short-term goals and then your long-term financial goals. So what are your goals for, say, the next 12 months? And then what are your goals for 3 years, 5 years? When you get out, for example, if you are at, let's just say you're doing $500,000 in gross revenues now, you want to grow over the next 12 months, you want to grow at 10%, 20%, whatever it is. Let's just say I want to grow it. So I'm doing $600,000 in gross revenues. And then you say, well, in 5 years, I wanted to be doing 5 million. That's a really large jump. So again, what are the realistic goals for you to truly get in 5 years? And then if you can get that in 5 years, how are you getting there, right? So again, what are you doing? You're building out a forecast and a budget so that you can work off of that to help you drive to get to the point where you're building out your revenues to that point where you can actually facilitate that growth, right? You want to, again, as I mentioned, align your budget with your growth plans. So you may have a plan to hit 5 million in 5 years. Well, what is the budget that you're going to need to do on an annual basis to get to that point, right? What are you going to need to spend to generate the revenues to get you to that point, and actually mapping out what that looks like year over year over year. And then again, working towards that plan. And then you always want to have some type of profitability target, whatever that is. If you're coming from a place where you've been barely profitable at maybe, 1 or 2% profitability year over year, and maybe your goal the next year is to get to 3 or 4% or 5%. And then the year after that, 7%, and then 10%. You're slowly working towards increasing the profitability, potentially increasing your revenues, maybe decreasing your expenses, right? You're looking at what you need to budget to do all of these things to hit the various targets, to hit that revenue target. What expenses do I need to spend to earn those revenues? And then ultimately, how profitable can I be earning those revenues, right? You want to set goals that you can achieve and you can reach. We all want to set stretch goals, but we always, when we're building out forecasts for clients, where do we think they're going to fall? Like best case scenario, worst case scenario. And then what's that super stretch? Like if we could really do this thing, what does that look like? But actually having financial goals around each one of those scenarios so that you have something to work towards. You always want to plan for unexpected costs or emergencies, right? Why do you want to have an emergency fund? Because there is nothing worse than getting to that place in life and you suddenly don't have the revenues, you don't have the cash flow coming in, and suddenly you don't have the cash to continue to pay those fixed costs that are going to come up, and they're going to show up every month. So you want to have that emergency fund to get you kind of over that hump, point A to point B. Hopefully it is a short period of time that you're trying to get past. Hopefully it's not a dire emergency. Sometimes it's just simply, and we see this a lot in construction, payment terms. people are not getting paid for 90 and 120 days. So while emergency may not be a like bad emergency, it might just be it took us longer to collect that money. So do we have like a little slush fund over here to get us from point A to point B until we get paid? And then we refill that little emergency slush fund, right? So it's not necessarily always a bad emergency, like something horrible happened. It's just, gee, it took us longer to collect 2 or 3 of our invoices. And now, we've had to kind of dip into our savings in order to get us over this hump. So it's the same exact thing. You want to plan for the unexpected costs or an unexpected slow in collection or that, that emergency, right? Unfortunately someone gets sick. I get it. You want to have that kind of thought out. There's nothing worse than we want to see a business continue to grow, or at least to continue to operate should something happen, for example, in a small business to an owner. Is there some emergency funds to kind of get them over that hump, get them through that emergency? We always recommend you figure out what a percentage of your overall income. So maybe a percentage of the total dollars you collect, you start to throw into that slush fund. Maybe it's just 1% of every dollar that you collect, you put in this little emergency fund kind of for that rainy day. You'll want to figure out what your emergency fund would need to be should you need to get, and it's going to be this similar to your own home or personal budget. As a homeowner, or even as a renter, they say, want to have savings. You want to have that emergency fund of 3 to 6 months. Well, it's going to be the same thing in your business. Do you have an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months worth of expenses so that you can get over, again, any kind of unexpected situation and help you to get from point A to point B? And then the last is you're going to want to monitor your budget and you're going to want to adjust it regularly. Right? You're going to want to, you've created this plan. This is our budget. So it's going to be an ongoing process. It's not a one and done. It's not a set it and forget it. I made a budget, I stuffed it in a drawer and I don't look at it again. I want to look at the budget because I want to see what we actually spent against what we budgeted and where are there variations in that. Has there been an adjustment to our overall plan? Are you maybe growing faster than you thought you were going to? So you had a budget of X and now you've exceeded that. So that's where now you want to go in and adjust and review that budget and say, well, I had budgeted X every month for this item, but the reality is we're doing this in revenues every month. Therefore, this number has gone up. So now you're adjusting your budget moving forward. And so it's a fluid and always moving document. At the least, you want to look at it on a quarterly basis to review it and adjust it for any changes that have happened. Did you have a slowdown in your business? So again, if you had a slowdown, there might be the variable expenses that have come down, but maybe your actual fixed, they don't, because those are the ones that are going to show up every month regardless. So again, what are you adjusting as you're moving throughout the year? We're not taking the budget and set it and toss it in a drawer. We're looking at it regularly to determine what has changed and do we need to make revisions to that budget moving forward. When we're working with our clients, we're typically using different software products. And I've talked about this before. You don't have to use software products. We happen to use them. It does simplify certain aspects of what we're doing. And so we're tracking the client's expenses. We're building the forecasts in those products. We're looking at the actuals that the clients are doing against the forecast that was created, right? So that budget to actual, what changed? Do we have to change anything moving forward? And then again, it also allows us to look at cash flow in a real-time fashion. So we can map out, again, what we think will change. Has their assumptions in the budget changed? We change the forecast and the budget moving forward. How does that affect the client's cash flow and being able to see that in a little bit more of a real time? Again, you can do this all in an Excel sheet or a Google sheet. It is absolutely doable. We just happen to use accounting and different types of forecasting softwares to do this. It allows us to go in quickly, make adjustments to clients' budgets a little bit in a more quicker and efficient manner, and then be able to run those kind of what if scenarios a little bit more easily, making quick adjustments to things and running it and actually giving a client something to look at. a little bit quicker, say, hey, this is what, best case scenario, if this, and changes and we change this, okay, this is what we think it's going to look like. Versus sometimes with an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, it does become a little bit more challenging to actually make those adjustments. And then unfortunately, the downside is sometimes the sheets, if they're connected to each other, tabs and sheets break and so on and so forth. So we do rely upon softwares. We do rely upon the technology. Again, I'm not saying you have to use that. It tends to be a little bit easier for making those quick adjustments so that you can actually see what a quick adjustment looks like in a final for over a 12-month, 2-year, 3-year type of thing. So what are some of the strategies to kind of sticking to your budget, right? That's the biggest thing. We've created this thing. We've created this budget thing, right? We have it in an Excel format. We have it in some sort of forecasting software. How do we stick to it, right? So you're going to want to keep your business and personal expenses separate. We always recommend using some sort of budgeting software in your accounting tools. You want to set spending limits and cut unnecessary expenses. You want to automate your savings and expense tracking, and you want to do regular budget reviews, and you want to do regular adjustments, right? So those are the main 5 things that you're going to want to do when you're trying to stick to this budget that you've created. So what exactly does that mean, right? Separating your business and personal. I've talked about this before. This tends to be a challenge with a lot of clients, but you want to have dedicated accounts for your business and your personal, and you do not want to commingle them, right? It becomes a lot harder to kind of pick out personal expenses that are in a business that don't actually belong there, that don't affect your budget. So you want to keep them separate so that you either pay yourself weekly, monthly, however it is, you get a paycheck, you get a draw, it goes into your personal account, and then it pays your personal expenses. Again, the only thing going out of the business is actual business related expenses. A lot easier to track your budget to your actual. It's a lot easier to track your overall cash flow when you're not commingling your business and your personal into business accounts. Business budgeting software and accounting tools. Again, I highly recommend it. Not everybody wants to use it. Again, an Excel sheet, a Google sheet will work. We work with a number of different products. You can do some budgeting in your accounting software, which might be a QuickBooks or a FreshBooks or a Xero in the Sage products. So you'll have the ability to do some level of that in there. We happen to use a couple of standalone tools that work side by side with our clients' QuickBook files. So we happen to use products like LivePlan, Fathom to actually build out budgets. They're showing us clients' KPIs, but they're also allowing us to kind of build out budgets for them, forecasts, so that we can look at that budget to actual based on what they expected to happen. And then again, what we think will happen. And we can quickly make adjustments in those tools. Those are not the only ones. There are a number of them out there. Those just happen to be the ones that we use and that we rely upon a lot with our clients. You want to set spending limits and cut unnecessary expenses. We all do it. It's just like your home budget, right? Are you unnecessarily, ordering from Amazon every other day and getting packages and you don't actually know what's come in the door? It's the same general idea in your business, right? You need to prioritize the essential expenses, the things that are like kind of the must-haves. And then in most cases, eliminating the waste, the extras, the stuff that you don't need, because it's the stuffs that you don't need, the extras you don't need that start to nibble away at your profit and at your cash flow. And then your ability to, again, do other things in your business, put more towards growing it, which will, again, require you to spend more money in other areas. But again, if these little things, the little wasteful things are nibbling away at your overall profitability, those are the kinds of things that, will hurt a budget. And hurt your ability to grow your business or even sustain a good quality business. It eats away at your cash flow and it eats away at your profits. If you are in construction, again, you tend to have relationships with your materials suppliers. Maybe you have some of the subs that you use very regularly. Are there terms that you can negotiate with those vendors that are going to be a little bit more beneficial to you from an overall budget standpoint and then overall cash flow standpoint? So again, can you push out some of those expenses, some of those payments a little bit farther especially, in construction, if you're waiting 90, 120 days to get paid, if you owe your material vendor in 30 days, there's a gap period that you need to get. So again, it's something like that. Those are little things that you want to think about when you're budgeting. Can you find ways to save? Or, hey, I'm buying in bulk from you. I buy so much every year. Can I get a discount because I'm buying so much? Or, if I pay you a tiny bit early, can I get a discount, right? Sometimes those things are in fact beneficial. You just have to determine whether it makes sense in your particular business. Automate your savings and your expense tracking, right? If you are putting 1% of every dollar you bring into your business into a savings account, have that automatically go into a savings account, right? Don't let it be sitting and relying upon a person to physically move that money. You want to do that automatically to make sure, hey, that I'm actually truly funding my emergency savings account. Or, are you tracking the expenses so that you can, in fact, see, for example, the business gets a little bit larger. You have a number of team members who now have cards and they're able to make purchases and so on. Are you tracking where they're making purchases? For example, we tend to see one of the big things is how many times a day are, project managers running off to the Home Depot, the Lowe's, the local hardware store to get the little thing here, the little thing there. Well, when you start to look at all of those expenses in the aggregate, are you truly overspending because you didn't plan appropriately for all the things you were going to need on a job? So again, those are the little things that start to eat away, not only at your profitability, but also start to eat away at your cash. So again, if you're tracking those expenses and you're automatically tracking them, you have the ability to see them a little more real time and make decisions on those things. And again, make adjustments, maybe rethink how you are purchasing your materials so that you don't have those little run off and let me go and get this little thing here and little thing here. My team, when they go to the job site in the morning, has everything they're going to need for the day, because again, those little spends here and there are the things that eat away at your profitability. And last, regular budget reviews and adjustments. So you're going to want to look at those regularly. Monthly, we do a lot with clients. Quarterly, if we meet with them quarterly, we are looking at their budget to actual on a quarterly basis. Are we overspending on line items, underspending? What changed? And then from there, if something did in fact change, we are making adjustments. But all of our decisions are built and driven on the data that we have and the information we already have and that we're making on anything subsequently. So again, I've got a plan. Did I follow that plan, or did that plan kind of come to fruition like I thought it was? No, these are the adjustments. Oh, well, these are things that actually will never happen again. Okay, we don't make any adjustments, but oh, yes, this is actually something that's going to continue to happen. I need to adjust my budget moving forward because this is something that's going to keep coming back. So again, it's not a set it and forget it, throw it in a drawer, don't look at it. You want to look at that, and you want to, at the minimum, look at it on a quarterly basis to see that you're in line with what you expected it to be. So what are some of the common budgeting mistakes, and how to avoid those mistakes? So what are they? You're underestimating your expenses and you're overestimating your revenue. You're not accounting for slow seasons or unexpected costs. You're failing to review and adjust the budget regularly. You're mixing business and personal expenses, and you're not planning for tax and debt repayment. So let's talk a little bit more in detail about each and every one of them. Underestimating your expenses and overestimating your revenue happens all the time. I think our revenues are going to grow 20% year over year, and this is what it's going to cost us to generate that. And you don't do those revenues, but at the end of the day, it ended up costing you more to try to generate those revenues, right? But if you're not looking at that, you can't course correct. So again, you don't want there to be such a fluctuation from your history. Making assumptions and not considering your history can really be a detriment for building out your forecasts and your budgets for the future. So again, if you don't want there to be such deviation from history that, again, you run into a place where, oh, I thought I was going to double my revenue year over year. Well, you've never done that before, and there's a lot that goes into that and a lot more cost that goes into generating that. And therefore, oh, I didn't hit that double revenue year over year, and it cost me a lot more money. Therefore, damages your profitability and then may potentially damage your cash flow. So again, you want to find what your stretch goal is, but you don't want it to be completely not based in reality, because that will definitely throw off any plans that you have. A lot of people don't consider slow seasons or unexpected costs, right? We talk about that, the unexpected costs, the unexpected emergency, the I waited for 2 or 3 invoices 120 days instead of 90 days like we usually do. 30 more days is a long time, especially in a business. So you've not considered for that. You've not considered for there being, especially in colder parts of the country, it's actually a colder winter than people expected. So we didn't pick back up in the spring as quickly as we typically would, right? So you've got to account for those type of things when you are building out your budgets and kind of those what if scenarios. What if the winter lasts longer than we thought? What if the winter was colder and therefore the ground does not thaw right away? We're not necessarily out right away in the spring in March. We might not get out there till April to actually start to really generate the bulk of our revenue. So again, if you don't think about those things, that's a what if scenario. What if this happens? The winter lasts longer. You want to kind of run that scenario and see what you think it's going to look like. A lot of people just take that budget, set it and forget it, stuff it in a drawer, don't look at it again. So really, a common mistake is not looking at the budget, reviewing it, and making adjustments regularly. Those are things that need to become part of that, your monthly, at the least your quarterly review of your financial review of what's going on in your business. Again, I always talk about mixing business and personal. That's a huge problem. That will always be a huge problem. Again, as I mentioned, you're going to want to keep it separate. Pay yourself a salary, consistently a draw, pay your personal expenses out of a personal bank account. Nothing comes through your business. And the last thing, especially, rolling through a tax season, is a lot of times people don't consider the effects of tax payments or even debt repayment. So when we're talking about cash flow, what we're not thinking about, your tax expense is not an expense to your business. Your tax expense is is cash flow out the door. It's debt repayment. Those are the types of things that people don't think about. That's cash that's going to go out the door. Those are things that you need to consider, and it's going to ultimately affect your cash flow. So what can you use that can help and make your budgeting a lot easier? We always recommend some type of accounting software, an expense tracking type of app, maybe even a financial planning class, a book. There are courses that you can find. Those are all things that there are a lot of tools out there. So again, when we talk about your accounting software, what is that? A lot of people use QuickBooks. That tends to be the go-to most people have. It's not the only one on the planet. It tends to be the one that a lot of people have. Xero, FreshBooks, Sage. They're all different products out there. Again, you're going to use that budget. You're going to use that historical information from that accounting software to help you build out your budget. And in some cases, those softwares will allow you to build a budget directly in there. So again, if you have the ability, to use that budgeting software that's in your accounting software that's already there. Expense tracking apps, we use a number of different ones with clients. There are tons of them out there. We use Dext for tracking receipts with clients. It's becoming more common in a lot of these products where you in fact can track your receipts. So it allows you to track the expenses and the receipts all in one place. So if you can pull them into all one thing, I absolutely highly recommend that. We use products like LivePlan and Fathom for actually creating forecasts for clients. Some clients may not want to go that deep with using that type of software. So that's where they kind of look to someone like us to do it. Again, as a business owner, you can always use an Excel file or a Google Sheet. They'll all get you to the same place. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We always love to hear from you. As always, we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you here every week on the Construction CPA's Coffee Cafe. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook. We're now on Instagram. So we're the Construction CPA on Instagram. So we look forward to seeing you here every week. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week.